Okay, we're live. Right, welcome everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for another edition of Remote SEO. Today's topic is all about using data and reporting to drive decision-making in SEO. Cool. Yeah, it can definitely be tricky when you've got all this brilliant data, but then you can't seem to kind of win over those stakeholders and get those things implemented off the back of it. Luckily for you guys, we've got some fabulous expert speakers on this topic. So welcome Steph Watley, Nick Wilson, and Anna Lewis. There we go, great stuff. So basically the format of today, we're gonna have, so each speaker is gonna have about 10 minutes or so to run through their slides. First up, we'll have Steph from Blue Array, then we'll have Nick of Vodafone Partner Markets, and then finally Anna Lewis from Polkadot Data. If her camera works at some point, we'll be closing out the presentations, but I might have to do some interpretive dance just to kind of make sure that goes as smoothly. Sweet, all right. Yeah, so after the presentations, we'll go into an FAQ section at the end. So please do get involved in the chat on the side. You can add your questions throughout the session. I think Matt, who you'll see his name, Matt Williamson in there, he's going to be picking out any kind of questions and running polls throughout. So do get involved. As well, please do tweet us, hashtag RemoteSEO Meetup, if you fancy getting involved in that. Cool. Oh yeah, so before Steph kicks us off actually, do stick around at the end. We're offering a 15% discount on our SEO Manager course on the Blue Array Academy. So I'll remind you about that later, guys. Wicked. All right. So yeah, without further ado, Steph, would you like to take it away?
Can everybody hear me okay, just to check? Excellent. Excellent. Always a good start. Hi, everybody. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Steph Watley. So I'm an SEO manager at Blue Array. I've been there for a couple of years now. And in the team, one of my favorite things is doing analysis and finding different ways to report on client data. So I've got a few tips for you today, so I'm just going to jump right in. So my first tip is to not be seduced by vanity metrics. So obviously I've included a picture of Flynn Rider, the most charismatic Disney sort of prince. Is he a prince? I don't know. He's lovely anyway, but he's incredibly smarmy. So he's a very vain person. And the kind of metrics that Flynn Rider would probably enjoy are keyword rankings. So everybody who knows me knows that I have some quite strong feelings about keyword rankings. And the reason for that is I feel that keyword rankings can quite often be a bit of a distraction for a lot of businesses and for a lot of clients. On their own, a keyword ranking doesn't really mean anything. You could have a very competitive keyword, so you might rank in position 8 for it, for example, but actually there's so many SERP features and things like that. It's not really a true measure of where it's appearing in search results, and therefore it's not necessarily something useful when considering performance. The other thing is that no matter what sort of position you're ranking in for a certain keyword, if your site's kind of crap, it's not really going to do you any favors once they click through. So if it's an awful site, they're probably going to bounce off. And if you've got a really wonky conversion funnel, that's not really going to help either. So keyword rankings is something that we can take note of, and they're quite useful to help us find areas of the site, but they're not necessarily the be all and end all. The second thing is that backlinks are not equal. So I've worked with a few clients in the past where they've said, we've got X many backlinks in the last month. And I've said, great, so what? Are they good backlinks? Are they pointing to the pages we want? Are they using the correct anchor text? And are they strong pages themselves? So even in a case where you've got a link from a good, trustworthy domain, it might not necessarily be the case that it's a very strong page on the site. It might be quite far from, any strong internal links and things like that. So it's really a case of diving a little bit deeper to try and understand a little bit more rather than just saying, we got this many backlinks. Are they follow? Are they affiliate? All these kind of factors need to be looked at a little bit more closely. Okay, so thirdly, something that is quite often overlooked is the quality of traffic and not just the quantity. So what I suppose I mean by this is the fact that we could be getting loads of impressions for something that is completely unrelated to our business or an area of the market that we don't necessarily want to be associated with. So for example, I had a client who were ranking for some slightly nefarious terms. which were kind of relevant to the industry, but not to their specific business model. So having a look at whether the traffic coming onto your site is the kind you want is also really important, and not just the volume coming in. We'll talk about this a little bit later, but you can also look a little bit more into user behavior to try and identify whether it is qualified traffic or if it's just kind of as what they call spray and pray in some realms of advertising as well. Little bonus tip for you there, just from a reporting side of things, percentages are not always the most helpful thing in the world. They can be really, really useful, but I think only when accompanied by absolute figures. So it can be quite misleading to say, oh, we had like a 300% increase in clicks from month on month, but that actually might be a very small amount. And actually, if you prioritize that as our best uplift of the month, it might still be actually quite small fry compared to other more important pages on the website. So I would always recommend and advocate for using absolute figures as well as percentage difference. All right, so tip 2 is review holistically. So if you think like Google, they don't really pick a single metric or element of your site and say, okay, that's good, therefore we'll rank it in position 1. Not that keyword rankings are important, obviously, as I just said. But yeah, if you think from Google's perspective, they're going to be looking at things a little bit more broadly around the site. So don't look at individual metrics in isolation, because they're really just a small piece of the puzzle. The other thing that can be a little bit tricky about that is that they can be quite distracting. They can sort of mislead you from other areas which are actually more important. You find one issue and you say, great, I can stop looking now, this must be the cause. But actually you might be completely ignoring something that's a lot more significant and might have quite a large impact if ignored. It can also mean that you take an action that actually makes things worse because you've not looked at this actual issue or metric within the context of the site. So trying to address that issue might actually lead to some issues elsewhere. So it's always important to kind of think more broadly about what you're looking at and not just each metric individually. My second tip in this section is to blend data. So we're really fortunate in this day and age that we have so many ways to do that. We can use APIs, we can use Google Data Studio, Google Sheets is getting better. We've got BigQuery now. There's so many ways that we can do this to help us kind of get a little bit more information. So a few examples of what that might look like when doing some analysis to try and really kind of tease out what are the real connections here. You could look at PPC activity and brand keyword activity. You could look at page speed and keyword rankings for certain areas of the site. And you could also look at impressions and seasonality as well. So those are the kind of things that you could weigh in together. One thing that I would say is obviously use this wisely because correlation is always, not always, causation. So always try to handle that data carefully and not just run with an assumption, but it can help you see the bigger picture. Here's just kind of a few bubbles that I've put on the screen just to kind of help with that thinking. So if we think about organic entrances as the big one in the middle, that's obviously what a lot of us report on. But the smaller bubbles all around it are the kind of things that we should be really taking into consideration alongside traffic. So things like technical health of the site, is our sitemap up to date? Is our page speed awful? Have we accidentally canonicalized to the wrong page? These kind of things need to be considered when you're actually analyzing traffic and not just looking at them completely on their own. I would also say have a think about relative contribution. So the role of organic versus other channels. If you said that our organic traffic was up by, 30% month on month, but actually, our PPC traffic is up 800% month on month, that's something that we need to have a think about in terms of the context and the actions that are going to follow from that. So a little bit contradictory, but I would also advise to segment where you can. It's really important, as I mentioned earlier, not to chuck all organic users into the same pot. They do behave slightly differently. They have different routes to the site, so they may be entering at different places on the site. It may be that they're entering via different keywords, so potentially an analysis of where they sit on the sort of conversion funnel or the awareness funnel. You can't necessarily just take one statistic for all organic users and say, well, that's everything we need to know, because actually it might be that people are returning users. It might be that they've converted before, or they've dropped a conversion halfway through. These are the kind of insights that are going to help you actually get some actions out of what you need to do, rather than just taking that really top level figure. So yeah, finding actions and insights based on different behavior can also be quite good for tracking. If you segment down a little bit, it's going to be a lot easier for you to actually go on afterwards and see whether the actions you took had an impact. So that's another reason to do it, is just kind of drilling down a little bit more to try and find out a little bit more about, if we do this, will this segment improve? And if not, why not? If you are familiar with Google Analytics, you're probably going to already be aware that there are lots of segments that are built in already. If you're not aware, I would definitely advise that you go and have a play around. There's definitely a few just straight off the top of my head that I can think would be really useful. One of them is converters. So you can see organic traffic that's actually converting as opposed to just coming on and leaving. You can also see new and returning users, which is really, really useful to understand exactly how close to a purchase or a conversion that segment may be. But you can also build your own. And that's the great thing about having a bit more awareness around Google Analytics and Google Tag Manager and the kind of things that you can get out of it, is that your reporting can actually become a lot more targeted and a lot more sophisticated as well. So you can set up quite a lot of different measures or tracking areas on your site and actually be able to analyze by those segments. So it's all configured in the back end. It does require a little bit of knowledge around Tag Manager, but I would definitely advise that you hop on and have a little look around, because I think it's going to only improve the data that you're working with, which means better actions and better results. I would also recommend categorizing your pages by section. This is something we do routinely at Blue Array, and that is really just to help with speed. So it may be that you can actually pinpoint very quickly, especially if you've already set up in something like Data Studio. You'll be able to see exactly which areas of the site are causing issues. It may be that you've added a new tag for scrolling, in which case your bounce rate might change in that section of the site. These are all kind of things that you should be thinking about, rather than just taking, say, for example, like a flat bounce rate and applying it across the whole site, because it is definitely going to vary by the page and the type of user who's landing on that page. All right, so the last tip from me before I hand over to everybody else is to tell a story with data. Really, if you just take the metrics and the stats on their own, they're really not going to tell you very much. You need to do a little bit more diving. You need to understand where they sit in the context of all the other activities that are happening across the business or the site, because you can get things like above the line activity, which can really affect organic traffic. You need to tell a bit of a story. So to help you kind of visualize that, if you were to think of a fictional novel, your introduction would be, this is the metric. What does it tell us? Is it actually valuable? Is it important? Where are we going to go with this? Then moving on, you can actually talk about what's actually happening with that metric. Has it improved? Is it good or bad? If so, why? And what does that actually mean in terms of what we're going to do as a result of that? Which obviously leads to the epilogue, which is, okay, we know what this is. We know it's important. This is exactly what happened. And this is what we're going to do about it. This is where it fits in. And this is how we're going to get to our eventual destination. This is what we want to do. So I think that's it. I will just say that it's a random picture of Tom Hardy. If you like BBC's Book at Bedtime, as I do, you will enjoy Tom Hardy. So I thought I'd throw him in because I would like him to tell me a story with data. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Steph. Awesome stuff. Great. Yeah, so remember, we'll be posing questions to our wonderful panel at the end. So do keep those questions coming in the chat. And yeah, I think without further ado, shall we crack on to Nick Wilsden? Right, Nick, are you there?
That's me. Yeah, brilliant.
You're there. Right, take it away.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, thanks for inviting me along to this. My name is Nick Wilsden. I'm a consultant, to be honest, but I work with Vodafone partner markets. I'm working across 40 countries for them. But I've also helped run the global search program across Vodafone Group across 26 countries. So I absolutely love this topic, and I love data, and I love what you can do with data. And I thought I'd come at this from a slightly different angle because all of Steph's tips are fantastic and they're all 100% useful and accurate. But I think there's an area that we often forget about when it comes to getting decision makers to do what we want with the data and the dashboards that we present. And largely those things come around the soft skills, our communication, the way that we interact with people. And what I find fascinating in this area is that we just don't really address this very much. So, you know, like any other content, you want this content to hit the audience and you want that audience to do something for you. So in much the same way that we target content, we have to target our data and we have to target our dashboards to the right people in the right way. So that's kind of the angle I want to take from this. And I wanted to give you 3 tips on how I've found that's worked for me, because I think this could give you an edge if you get all the best practice down and then do this. So the first tip I want to take you through is know your audience. And this very much relates again to content. We do this with content all the time, don't we? We sort of say, you know, what's the audience for this content? And we're going to create this kind of content for them, this kind of content for them. And we just don't do this with data so much. We tend to think there's one view of data and that objective view is the same for everyone. But it has to appeal to the target audience. We have to aim the content appropriately. And the way you do that is by understanding who you're communicating to and what's the message you want to convey to those people. Now, the first way we kind of think about our audiences, who are the audiences that we deal with? It is the client, but is it an operational team? Is it a senior management team? Is it the CEO of the company? Is it the board? You know, which level of people are you communicating with, and how can you get a point across to them that will be meaningful to them? And it won't be the same dashboard, it won't be the same data. And you'll find this throughout all data visualization, that people tend to have different kind of data visualizations for different people. Generally for senior managers, senior stakeholders, you want to think less about the detail. You want to think about the rolled up numbers, the big picture, the clear message. That's usually the first tip. So simplify massively what you're doing, because you'd need a much more in-depth, detail reporting going to an operations or a team or an SEO team than you would to the CEO of the company. So, and you know, how do we kind of practically address that? Well, the first thing is reporting KPIs, and you'll often see people talk about reporting KPIs for SEO, and they'll say, you know, these are obviously not keyword rankings. Steph's 100% right with that, but they'll often say, you know, this is traffic, and traffic's a very noble KPI. It's good, but does that mean anything to the CEO of the company? And the question is usually not. The CEO usually likes commercial KPIs, and they like KPIs that relate to their personal development goals. How can you know what those are? Because obviously you can't kind of question the CEO. Well, my top tip for you would be go and read the annual report from the company you're dealing with. And I find people don't do this very often. If you go and read that annual report, you'll see what the top line objectives are for that company. You know, what is it in telco? Is it mobile engagement? Is it you know, new accounts? Is it call center deflection? These are top level KPIs you'd only find out if you actually read the annual reporting. So go and download this, access it, and you'll get a really good idea of what's important to them. And you'll often be quite surprised that it's not what's important to you. You'll be hitting impressions and they'll be hitting commercial value of SEO. The other thing you can do from that kind of design is obviously understand how they present data. And I'll go into that in a bit more in a sec. As I said, the appropriate level of detail is really important. Think about conveying a very simple message to those people, especially senior people. They don't want to get lost in the detail. They want very clear messaging. And if you can employ concepts like the 3-minute story, which is very similar to elevator pitch, you know, can you describe to me in 3 minutes what you want this data to tell me? Then you've already succeeded. Or the big idea, can you summarize everything you're doing into a single sentence for that data? So they can walk away with one clear idea of what you want to do. And when we're talking about decision making in SEO, I think from an operational standpoint, we're often saying, you know, how are we informing SEO decisions? But I use it in a far wider sense than that. I use it to make political decisions around the company. So I like data that helps me not only kind of, you know, understand SEO and be more practical in terms of deploying SEO, but how can I use data to increase team efficiency? How can I get team resource increased? How can I increase budgets? and how can I enforce governance, SEO governance across the site? The scope of what you can do with your data is far wider than simply kind of SEO objectives. And I'd give you, because obviously it's 10 minutes, so it's not very long. So I want to signpost where you can go and do some further reading. And I've linked to two of my favorite books on this subject, and they aren't that cheap. They're £20 each, but it will be the best £40 you've ever spent. And the first book that I'd recommend you go and get is Storytelling with Data, which is an absolutely fantastic book. Cole Nussbaumer Knaflick, hopefully I pronounced her name correctly. She's an absolute genius, and it's a very clear book that takes you through all these kind of concepts and ideas. Now, my second point is about design, and we very rarely talk about design when it comes to data and dashboards. And I've seen so many terrible dashboards in my time, and you've got to think about how do people take in this data? How do they appreciate this data? Well, we're visual people. We like visually pleasing things, and that shouldn't be different when it comes to data and dashboards. If you want people to engage with your data, with your information, and you want them to make those decisions, you want to reach those objectives that we just talked about, your data has to be beautiful. There's a reason, if you look at this first quote, this is how Google describes Data Studio. Your data is beautiful, use it. Unlock the power of your data with interactive dashboards and beautiful reports that inspire smarter business decisions. Google's used the word beautiful twice in that phrase, and for a reason. Google knows that beautiful reports tend to get more action. They'll get more interaction from senior stakeholders, they'll get more use and interaction from practitioners. So take some time to actually think about how you can make these reports better and more better looking. Design skills are really rare for data scientists, and that can be your secret weapon. If you want to have a sort of unnatural advantage in this area, learn how to do some basic design. In terms of how we do that design, I mean, you've got to understand the basics of data visualization, and I've linked to another book here called Good Charts by Scott Bonato, and this is a fantastic book as well. He'll take you through and show you in much ways Cole's book does, what you should be doing, what you shouldn't be doing. And this is the stuff that you only really learn when you work alongside data visualization experts. You learn how to eliminate clutter. You learn how to use space properly. You understand Gestalt principles, and Gestalt principles are been around since the 1900s in terms of how human beings understand visual elements. How do we understand that things are grouped together? How do we understand that these charts on your dashboard relate to this area, these charts relate to another area? It's absolutely genius. When you start reading through this, you'll suddenly a light bulb will go over your head, and you'll realize, that's the order I should have my chart in. That's how I organize dates. This is how I organize groups of information, and it just makes all of your work so much better. It'll be accelerated. And also, I actually prototype on paper usually first before I even start making data. I think about the objectives, I think about how I'm going to visualize it, and then I start drawing and doodling on paper before I even get into it. And look for the opportunities. There are opportunities coming out. I mean, Data Studio, when it first started, was incredibly ugly. It wasn't pretty. There are more and more opportunities now to make it look better. I think things that have worked really well for me have been putting in visual elements. You can use Photoshop. You can do PNGs. You can put in images into the dashboard that look great. You can even use custom fonts. There's a community plugin for Data Studio that allows you to make use of all the custom fonts in the Google library. So it's little things like this that you can do to really kind of heighten the look of your dashboards. So you have both substance and style, and getting them both together is you're gonna succeed. And I've had my dashboards up against huge design teams and won over them just with some of these tips. And the other quick tip that you can do as well in this, that annual report that you downloaded in the last slide, go and have a look at how they present data in the annual report, because they would have spent a huge amount of time from the brand team understanding how to present data and how to do it in an on-brand way. And you can literally just lift that look and feel and take that into your dashboards, and instantly you've got something you're putting in front of senior stakeholders that resonates with them, because it looks exactly like their annual report. It looks like the reports that they have at board level that they look at closely. So that's a really good tip for kind of getting your dashboard and your data and your messaging over to the right people. Now, my third tip, and I always think about democratization of data, and I always go here for Fight Club, because this is how I feel about this. The data belong to Visa and MasterCard, and at the end of the film, it all gets destroyed. Well, it's basically destroyed, but we're going to say more about sharing it. Data is not owned by any one group. And previously with data, it's been owned by the data team, and it's been very hard to kind of proliferate that through the organization. So at best, we kind of have data that's given to senior stakeholders, but very rarely is it shared with the operational teams and shared through every part of the organization. And that's the only way that you can really make data useful, is by getting everyone to start using it. And one of the top tips I give you for this is support tools that understand how important it is to make data portable. And by that, I mean, don't support SEO tools that don't allow you to export freely out of their system with ease, without extra payments, into systems like Data Studio. That will allow you to take data out of their walled garden and bring it into an environment that everyone can share, use, and make use of. This has some huge advantages beyond sort of data portability. It has advantages for access, because different teams can then access your data and blend it, as Steph says, blend with other forms of data, other first-party forms of data that you have in your business. So you can then start to make use of it outside the walled garden of SEO and start to have SEO data being used throughout the organization. On top of that, it can save you costs, actually, because when you start to export this data, you often don't have to worry about seating costs on individual SEO tools, because you can bring it into Data Studio and you can export from Data Studio and you can use it to other teams without having to worry about sort of access to the data within that walled studio. And then beyond that, again, it's around first-party data. As we get more and more data from internally within our organization, we can't give that and put that into third-party tools. We don't want to upload all of our sensitive commercial data into an SEO tool. So it's a really kind of future-proof way of dealing with your data. And then once you've done this, you've got to think, how can you use data to drive decision-making through all levels of your organization? And you've got to think beyond, one part of it's senior reporting, which we've discussed, but the other part is operational teams. How can you drive it with them? I often think about lead and lag indicators, which is quite interesting for me. If you're on a building site and you were looking at the number of accidents that you had every month, that would be a lag indicator, because it's already happened. And these are the kind of indicators that senior management are concerned with. A leading indicator would be how many people are wearing hard hats every day in the site. So you can start to have a focus on lead indicators that are going to drive your overall objectives. And the lead indicators tend to be more for the operational teams. So I tend to design ad hoc dashboards very quickly that address some of these lead issues and give people very quick, actionable dashboards to kind of start doing things. And these can be done very quickly. And I'll give you a quick example just before I go. This is one that I love, and it's one that all of you can go and do today. Get into your Google Search Console data, start to filter it by questions. And here I've filtered it by how, why, what, where, all the main questions terms, and start to pull out the questions that people are asking and how many clicks and impressions you're getting. And then create a regularly scheduled PDF that sends this to the support team. And you'll start to kind of make this SEO data go into support team. They'll start to think, well, how can we answer more questions? How can we increase the number of questions? How can we do better answers? How can we add FAQ schema onto these? So this kind of data at that level can really help drive decision-making through all parts of your organization. So that's it. Thank you very much. And I'll move on to the next presenter.
Yeah, wonderful stuff. Yeah, I'm a big fan of people getting the sort of pen and paper out and doodling their ideas. I think that's definitely a good way of getting things nice and clear in terms of ideas. Cool. Cheers, Nick. Yeah, love that.
Cheers.
All right. So yeah, before Anna runs through her slides, just a quick reminder to stick around at the end. We'll be offering a 15% discount on our SEO Manager course for the Blue Array Academy. So yeah, do stick around at the end. And yeah, keep getting your questions in through the chat as well. All right, Anna, are we ready? Yay, the camera's working, fantastic.
Freaking you out by saying that I have absolutely no camera and no laptop less than an hour ago.
No worries. Right, well, yeah, speak up a little bit because I think it's a little bit quiet. But,
bring the microphone in.
Take it away.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So I'm Anna and I run Polkadot Data. It's really interesting when you come along to these events. Quite often you think that you're coming to learn new things, but also what you're looking at is the ability to be reassured that a lot of things that you're doing might be on the right track. So I love that what we've heard from Steph and Nick so far is really on board with a lot of what I would also recommend and what I'm pushing people to do at the moment. So some of my tips overlap, but that's only going to emphasize the point further that this stuff is really important. And looking at your data without taking in all of this is it's not going to give you the best effect. So using all these tips together is going to work really well. And this is also one of the things that got me into where I am. So I run Polkadot.Data, which is a web analytics agency. And the reason I got into analytics was because there were so many people in, when I was working in SEO and PPC, there were a lot of people using the data inefficiently, shall we say, or not understanding it fully and not realizing the power that the data could actually give you. So that's what really got me looking into the results, how we could keep driving those positive results, those keyword rankings up from what we were tracking when I was doing SEO about 8 or 10 years ago. So it was really interesting to see the data, and that's what really inspired me to start moving towards data alone. So Polkadot.Data is an analytics agency. We focus predominantly on getting Google Analytics implementations to be at a sort of shit hot level, shall we say, especially for e-commerce brands and anybody with customer journey tracking. So it's great to understand how you can use Google Analytics and pull all that data together, and how you can fit it in with your other data. So I'll stop waffling. My top tips. Where's the next slide button? There it is. Well, that didn't work, did it? Next slide, please. There we go. So track the right numbers. Steph touched on this as well. It's really important to measure what matters and focus on what you can make a difference about. So this is all talking really about whether or not your data will actually help the business KPIs, because without focusing on what the purpose of these metrics are and what you're going to do with it, you might as well not be looking at these metrics. So we'll start anything, like Nick said, understand the business objectives, take the business goals, understand as a whole what they are. So have you got a global strategy? Is there a marketing strategy? What's the financial strategy? Where are you as a whole? Is it new customer acquisition? Is it growth? Is it average order value? Is it revenue? Is it long-term customers? So where does the business want to be? And once you understand that, you can start thinking about your objective within the grand scheme of things. So once you've got your objective, then you can look at what you're going to measure. So I will aim for this, which will be measured by my key results. So this is the OKR system, if anybody's heard of that before. Definitely worth looking into. It's really interesting. So I will drive more sessions or drive more sales via search. So this will be measured by sessions and sales and organic traffic, and organic conversion rate might be the sort of thing. So measured by organic sales would be your key result. So that's when you then say, right, I've got my organic sales is going to be my KPI. Now my tracking plan, obviously I need to make sure I'm tracking the sales. I need to make sure I'm tracking the sessions, then I can get the conversion rate. Is there anything else I need around that? What else can I measure? Then you can start thinking about your tracking plan. And so this might look slightly different for different areas of the business. So we've got SEO people might be looking at the search impressions, organic sessions, bounce rate. There's all sorts of things. And again, I've said, look at the tracking plan and what is my KPI and what is my key result. It's good to focus on those, but you do need to look at it in context, absolute numbers as well as percentages, comparisons, segments, all of that comes when you're coming to do the analysis and understand that properly so that you can better use that data. So we've got different numbers for if you're working in SEO, others for product marketing. As I said, we work a lot with e-commerce teams, so it's about getting them the right numbers to then help them drive in each area, even if it's, organic traffic to this category of our website. That's really important to then understand the progression through the site once the organic search has got them there. And then CRO, are you attracting the right people via organic? Are you attracting the right people via your search, via PPC, via email? What's working best, and where can you improve? So there's lots of things, and some of the things that are really useful to track here, which again, they're sometimes useful to know, even if you want to focus on organic, it can be really useful to still focus on some of these, because they could be stopping you from achieving your organic targets because of problems further down the line on the website. So it's worth having a bit of a wider view, take a step back, look holistically at the whole journey, and whether or not there's anything you can add to help everything improve better. So under the CRO side of things, I've got journey progression, so that you can see, what percentage of organic users reach the checkout page. And you can use Google Analytics Enhanced E-commerce to get you that data. And you could get it on a product level, you could get it category level. It's really good to get that, break it down by the segments, marketing or device type, country, or multiple ones of those. So that's brilliant. And again, you put your organic filter on that, and then you can see this. And one of the ones I want to highlight as well is anti-conversions. So this is if there's problems on the way through the checkout or through the website. What if an anti-conversion is the fact that they're coming in organically, but the organic product that they're seeing is out of stock? So seeing an out of stock product would act like an anti-conversion, because it's not very beneficial to a user to see an out of stock product, especially on a landing page when they've just arrived from their organic search. So what can you then do as an SEO to resolve that issue? So it's definitely worth having a look at these sorts of things, making sure you're tracking 404s, especially with an organic filter, see if there's anything ranking that's then coming to a 404. So all of this, it's about taking the right picture, but looking at the numbers that you can actually act on that will then help drive your main objective and reach the business objective. Because obviously, if the business makes money, you're all in a job. If the business doesn't, jobs become at risk. So everybody can contribute, and it's great to be able to be part of that and to be able to make a difference. I think that's really a nice and important way to use the data that you have available. So my tip number 2, automate the hell out of life. So my key thing here is really important to spend longer doing the actions that matter and that will have the most benefit than it is to spend knee deep in data. And that's coming from somebody who works in data. I would much rather have any client that I work with just not spend time reporting, not spend time building graphs and reports and pretty things. I would rather that they just get the data, they understand, and they use it as quickly as possible. You want to move on to that use it, make a decision and use it stage. And the reason this is, one example is when I moved into an in-house role managing the analytics for a global e-commerce company, there were a lot of people, maybe a half a dozen people in the office at 6 o'clock in the morning on a Monday. By 7 o'clock, there was, 10, 20 people, and there was that many people starting work at stupid o'clock in the morning, in my opinion, in order to generate reports for the 10 a.m. board meeting. And I came into the business and I did not understand why people were having to sacrifice sleep right at the beginning of the week, stress out and turn up so early in order to get a 42-page document ready for the board meeting at 10 o'clock. And there were so many numbers in this document. Now it's okay to be looking at a lot of numbers and a really wide depth of what's going on within the business. It's great that the company was so interested in what was going on. But to use that many hours from that many people and to also make the start of the week so stressful, one of the first things I tried to do was just automate it. And one of the things that was being done was there was a spreadsheet and somebody was going into Google Analytics custom reports and then typing in the numbers into a spreadsheet for 60 different numbers. And in fact, this isn't the only time I've seen it. I've seen it in so many businesses. And people don't realize that you don't have to do that. You can get out of this copying and pasting, this manual reporting cycle. There's a lot you can do to automate this, save your time and put your time into other things. And it's generally very, very quickly paid back in the effort that it takes to automate it. You can quickly get that time back. So I've spent a lot of my career automating things for people. And if you can't automate it, I would suggest that you have a good look at whether or not it's most useful to you. And like Nick said, choose the tools that actually allow you to get the data out. So if your tools are just data silo after data silo after data silo, perhaps you could have a think about how that could be reworked so that everything can just seamlessly pull their data into Data Studio or BigQuery or any of your other reporting tools, so that you can save hours a week, which adds up to days and weeks a year, that you could actually be working on getting better results instead of reporting. So do you actually need this if it's in a data silo? Is there a way to speed it up? Is there a way to integrate it better? Is there an API that you could get a feed from and push into something? So there's also lots of tools available to do this. BigQuery, Data Studio, the Google Sheets APIs are brilliant. So you can quickly and easily automate Google Analytics data into Google Sheets API. Supermetrics is a tool if you want a more comprehensive export tool, and that's whether or not it goes to Excel, whether the data goes to Google Analytics or Data Studio. You can get Google Analytics data, Facebook data, Twitter, paid ads, all sorts of platforms of data. You can push through the Supermetrics API and feed that data into your reports with a bit of setup, and that one has a subscription cost if you need to use some of those additional tools. But the cost of that versus hours of your time every week or month, you soon get it back for sure. Also, you could look at exporting all your SEO tools. You know, SEMrush, I know, can put loads of data into Data Studio, and you can take that and combine it with your other data, any other SEO tools. So just bring it all together, understand what's important, and don't go through a manual reporting process. It's not worth your time, and you can automate it. So do save yourself from report hell, really. So then my final one, I decided to go a little bit off tangent here, in that data is really important. We want to focus on the numbers and things like that, but it's also really good to think about what is included within this whole world of data. And a lot of what I look at is not just the numbers, but am I getting the right numbers? Am I getting the best numbers? And is there anything else I can do with the platforms that I have in place already for this? So something to focus on here is that Google Tag Manager is somewhere you can track your key metrics. You can track your conversions, anti-conversions, customer data, well, carefully, segments. You can add custom dimensions, product data, your e-commerce journey can go through there, your enhanced e-commerce setup, all your other tracking conversion pixels can go really nice and easily into Google Tag Manager to get you those numbers and to get all of that data. That's great. But also you can then work it the other way. And in order to improve those results and get better organic traffic, better numbers, better KPIs, you can sometimes you can use Google Tag Manager to manage things like schema or canonicals. And this is about, using the platform for a slightly different intent and thinking, well, okay, I don't need it for data right now, but it will help my data in the long run because I'm going to get better results. So where it might have a long development process, where it's hard to get time, or there's a long backlog in the queue for getting development work done, things like implementing schema, canonicals, cookies, things like that, rather than waiting, you can be quite agile with Google Tag Manager. And you can also get nice and complicated. So if you're managing a website and you've got a company with 200 stores all over the UK, and each one has slightly different opening times, especially at certain times of the year, bank holidays, that sort of thing, or different, if it's a seasonal business, you might have different Easter holiday opening hours in one area of the country to another. What you could do is really nice and cleverly use the schema functionality, take the JSON code, build it in Google Tag Manager, and you can build that to be much more dynamic. And you can also manage it through a spreadsheet and then upload that, format it as the tags and import that into the container. So there's some really good ways that you can speed up the work that you can do for your SEO by using the data technologies, but for some of your other beneficial purposes. So that's one of the things that I really wanted to just highlight, is that GTM is good for more than just data tracking. So here's an example of a schema tag. I had to take the actual data out, but you can see there, if you're familiar with schema, which I'm sure you are, this is the list of the schema items, and then you can put the variant in, or you can put in some fixed text, and you can do all sorts of different ones. So that's just a nice example as to how you can make the data useful for many different things. So the key point is track the right numbers, automate the shit out of life, and use your data technologies more smartly. And that's it from me for now.
Wonderful stuff. Thank you so much, Anna. Yeah, thanks everyone, actually. Some awesome insight there. Great. So I hope you've all got some solid tips off the back of that. Great. Yes. So as Sean has put in the chat, chat folk, it is your time to shine. So yeah, get your questions in now if you haven't already. And in the meantime, we'll get cracking. So if I turn my camera off. Lovely stuff. Okay, so are you ready for some hot questions?
Very ready.
Always.
Cool, let's do it. Okay, so question from Kim that's come through. So she said, question for all speakers. Where do you currently, or idealistically, record SEO changes versus engagement metrics to monitor impact? So yeah, she goes on to say that historically GA is the place for this, but she's interested in hearing what other systems SEOs are using. Yeah,
I can do that first. Unfortunately, I'm always put into Adobe hell. Now, I very rarely get GA, so I don't really have the option to put it into GA. I like the fact that a lot of the other SEO tools allow you to do that, but I actually got the best tip for that from a previous Reading SEO, where I came along and heard Daniel Cartland talk about embedding Google Sheets into Data Studio. So you can basically keep a log in Google Sheets and then embed it in a Data Studio report, so you can actually see a log change of what's happened on SEO within your reports. And obviously there's a million ways to update Google Sheets, so it means its data is incredibly portable, and it lives up to all my expectations for data portability.
Yeah, I was also going to refer to that talk, actually, Nick. It's a really good way to kind of just quickly integrate a log of any changes made. I think mainly it is GA for us. We don't tend to use Adobe, but yeah, analytics annotations are so helpful, especially if a website changes agency, for example, or get hit by any kind of penalty or algorithm. It's just really handy to have that kind of backlog of history to hand.
Yeah, and I think it's very unlikely that an SEO tool is going to allow you to export that anytime soon. So putting it into Google Sheets gives you far more flexibility.
Absolutely, and you get to own that data. So Google Sheets is wonderful for so many different things. You can then also, map that on a graph within your Google Sheets against your traffic. You can put, you could put it into Google Analytics as you've already said, annotations. You could potentially put it in as custom dimensions. I'm not sure you really need to go that far, but yeah, there's a lot of potential. But just Google Sheets is really great, and just bringing everything together.
Nice. Thank you very much, guys. Cool. Well handled. Right, let's come to the next question. So this one is from Lucy, and she has said, what are your tips for using data to increase stakeholder buy-in and commitment? And then she's put, particularly if that data showed a decline or a plateau in traffic.
I like these ones. These are the ones where you can use that data to, prove that what you're doing needs more investment or needs this sort of thing. So you can say, okay, well, we might have declined. If we can get this much traffic back, we can make this much more money. And if you give me this budget, this is your profit. So hopefully you can see my arms wiggling around. But the point is, you can use the data to tell that story and to say, look, if we had this much investment, this is how much we could earn back, and also to prove the loss So you could look at it and say, well, we could gain this. If we spent £10,000, we could gain £50,000. Or you could say, unless we spend £10,000, we're going to lose £50,000. Are you ready to lose £50,000? You know, I'll sit back if you are. And then by putting it that way, they you know, that helps get buy-in.
And Anna's so right about that. And the mistake people constantly make in our field is that they go to get a commercial decision like that and they come in with non-commercial metrics. So you're never going to get a decision maker to decide that kind of, to give you finance if you're going in with impressions or something like this. It's never going to happen.
Yeah.
So it's metrics that matter, but it's metrics that matter to that audience. And you know, don't be afraid of commercial metrics. Don't feel they're outside your remit for SEO. Push the company and the people you're working with to be able to tie the commercial metrics to the activity you're doing, and aim high, because even if you don't make it, you know, you still aimed high. Don't be afraid of commercial metrics.
Yeah, I'd also add that quite often some clients can be quite easily persuaded if you talk about competitors. So having that kind of data to hand can be quite a good sort of tool in your armory. You know, even if it's something quite simple like a crux report or something, being able to kind of compare like for like and say, well, this is this much faster, this is the abandonment rate. What would you like to see customers do?
Yeah, I love that report, Steph. It's so good. That got more action for me than anything, just putting up all the competitors and little mini crux reports and showing who's been improving over the time.
Next one. So this one I believe as well. This is from Kim. So we'll just pop this one in. So how long do you and your teams spend setting up the initial automated reporting systems?
So that's going to depend. I hate using it depends. I'm very sorry. However, it will be proportional to the current amount of time that you are spending reporting. So if you're spending an hour a week doing your reports, then I'd be happy to probably spend a day, if not more, to automate that, because you've earned that back. You've earned your time back within a couple of months. If you spend 4 hours a week setting up your getting your reports out and your data out, then you spend a week building the automation and you get that back. It's definitely proportional. And also look at the value of it. You know, can you streamline it whilst you're doing it to make sure that the metrics are actually useful and that people aren't just getting just data overload and just going, numbers, yeah, well, we've ticked that box, we've looked at the numbers, without actually making any action on them. So really use the automation process as a time to fine tune, reassess, audit, and make sure you're tracking the correct numbers, that they're accurate, and that everybody understands the correct definition as well. You quite often have people say, oh, well, this means this. And I'm like, oh, actually, it's totally the opposite to what you think. So sorry, that's not dropouts, or that's not progressions, that's dropouts. So your figure you were pushing to increase. So really important to use this time of automation to make it work, you know, properly for you. And automating in Data Studio these days, if you haven't started, just try. In 10 minutes, you could automate something that you're doing manually and takes you 2 hours. And you can literally have it in Data Studio so quickly. And then you get to add your design elements. So just do it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with front loading the effort. I think it is time well spent, even though it can be a bit, you know, stressful at the time, trying to make sure that it fits all of the things that you want it to do. You know, especially with Data Studio, because it can be quite fiddly. But it's just definitely worth spending that time at the outset, really just drilling down into exactly what you need to know and why. And one of the cool things that I quite often do is I'll have like a spare page on the back of the report. So if there's something I really quickly need to look at, as I'm doing like a piece of work, not just a report specifically, I can jump into that report and I've got all of my data sources already loaded and ready to go. So I can literally just say, okay, I just quickly need to know this. Bam, straight into Data Studio, and I've got all of those sources of data available at once.
Yep, no, absolutely. Yeah, I'd echo that completely. And I mean, in terms of automation, just add that one thing that I've learned over the last few years is that you can't always get it fully automated to start with. So don't beat yourself up if it's not 100% automated. Data is kind of a process, and sometimes especially in large organizations, you have to kind of slowly move towards the ideal. And that may mean that, you know, most of it is automated, or as much as it can be automated, and then you even have parts that are maybe static, that you have a few bits that are filled out in Google Sheets because it's different systems or different teams or departments, but you're bringing that in and blending it with your automated data, because then you create a roadmap, and then as you can then make, as Anna says, the argument that, we need to automate this because that team is spending X amount of time every week filling out that sheet. So aim for automation, but don't beat yourself up if you can't get there straight away.
So apologies if we don't get round to everyone today, but we've got a really interesting one from Andy, so I'm just going to pop that in the chat. So it says, I have the data, but need more help with the data analysis. Any pointers in who to follow or what to read so I can understand and act on the data I'm presented with?
I offer a service that does this for people. I mean, regular sort of monthly support in data insights, improving your analytics, and getting the most from your data is something that we offer. But definitely, there's some names out there. Back in the day, Avinash Koshek was always good about sort of really good analysis strategies and sort of pieces of how to look at things. These days, there's quite a few people talking about analytics and data. There's the Analytics Power Hour. There's the analytics. Oh, there's so many. Nick, I'm sure, and Steph, you've probably got some others to recommend. But there's
we've got. A lot of groups that we're in. I'm trying to think. People you've mentioned on Twitter. Grant Kemp, he's great. Those two books I referenced, honestly, they may seem expensive because data books usually are, but that'll be the best £40 you've ever spent. And it literally, you'll go through the theory, and then literally Cole will take you through each one of these types of diagrams, what the data they're trying to tell you, and that's the kind of information that you just really get from it's hard to pick up that data straight away. You have to have a really kind of in-depth session with data visualization people to get that, so you can pick out the insight really easily and show how to give that insight to other people. Yeah,
definitely. There's too many to kind of go through, really. But the ones that I always keep bookmarked are like Grant Kemp, as you said, Hannah Rampton, Roxana Stingu, she's great, Izzy Smith, so many great people in the industry. I'm sure there's probably a Twitter list somewhere with loads of great people on it.
Yeah, there's, in fact, a couple of weeks ago, there was which sort of analytics and data people do you have made an impact on Twitter? So dig up that conversation, because there was about 100 recommendations of different people in there. There's the analytics conference, which is very sort of niche, but really in depth, which is Super Week. So if you're into analytics and haven't heard of that one, that's one of the ones to really put on your radar. And then it's basically anybody who speaks there, is worth listening to. And likewise, there's Measure Camp events and things like that for that side of things. But also have a look. There's quite a wide range. There's data science, there's the analytics side, there's the visualization and the automation, there's the database and sort of CRM side of it. There's so many areas within data, so there's so many different answers you could give here. But yeah, just keep reading and keep learning. Look out for other events, Digital Elite next month, and Brighton SEO, Measure Fest, all these things coming up that are going to cover some more things. So yeah, just always keep learning.
Great stuff. Thank you so much, guys. Right, well, that's it for today. So yeah, thanks again to our wonderful speakers. Thanks to everyone who got involved in the chat as well. I hope everyone feels like they've got the tools to tackle data reporting and ultimately affect change, because that's what that's what we're trying to do here. So yeah, thanks to everyone who signed up to watch. So before you go, I think it is worth just saying, if you want to stick around for that 15% discount on your SEO manager course on the Blu-ray Academy, do that. There's also a pretty handy Blu-ray book, Mastering In-House SEO, which you'll be able to pick up on Amazon. And finally, we have the Blu-ray VIP community, which gives you access to a bunch of essentially exclusive Slack channels so you can throw your SEO questions to the community and bounce ideas off one another. So it's a great place to kind of interact with the community. Great, and yes, thanks for sorting that slide out. So we've got another event lined up on October the 14th. Yeah, it'll be all about using keyword research to form intent optimization strategies. So yeah, looking forward to seeing Jamie Grant, Alina Ghost, and James Brockbank host that one with me. And then yeah, so that'll be in 5 weeks' time. We're just allowing Brighton SEO for an extra week after that, of course, if that is going to go ahead as planned. Yeah, I think that's it, everyone. So I'm going to stay on the line for a little bit. Yeah, for the 15% off. But yeah, great. Thank you so much, everybody, and we'll see you all next time.
Thank you.
Right, thank you, everyone in the chat. See ya. Good stuff. Thank you, everyone, by the way. Appreciate that. Yes, we'll be back again on October the 14th. So yeah, do keep your ears and eyes peeled for that one. And yeah, it shouldn't be long now. I think if we kind of just give a few more seconds and then we'll kind of wait for people to just pop through, and then we'll end that session. Great stuff. Okay, cool. Thank you very much, guys. All right, bye.